So David Pecker is a chairman of the American Media Incorporated, which runs the National Enquirer. Now, he's also a friend of Donald Trump, or was a friend of Donald Trump. As you'll see, maybe not the best kind of friend, as he has all sorts of dirt on Donald Trump. Now, it turns out that President Trump, before, I guess, when he was candidate Trump, decided, oh, you know what I need to do with all that dirt that you have? I want to buy it. I want to buy that dirt from you so that I can destroy it. Awesome. Now, according to an article in the New York Times, he and his lawyer at the time, Michael Cohen, had devised a plan to buy up all the dirt on Mr. Trump that the National Enquirer and its parent company had collected on him, dating all the way back to the 1980s. What, you think Donald Trump hasn't always been a sleazebag? It goes back to the 80s and probably beforehand. Him doing terrible, shady things. Now, this is according to several of Mr. Trump's associates. Now, the existence of the plan, which was never finalized, has not been reported before, but it was strongly hinted at in a recording that Mr. Cohen's lawyer released last month of a conversation about payoffs that Mr. Cohen had with Mr. Trump. Now, in the recording, Cohen had said, it's all the stuff, because you never know. You never know when Cohen is going to face some legal difficulties and will turn on Donald Trump. Ironic. This is irony to the max. But anyway, the move by Mr. Trump and Mr. Cohen indicated just how concerned they were about all the information amassed by the company, American Media, and its chairman, David Pecker, a loyal ally for Trump for over 2 decades, who now has cooperated with investigators, of course, related to the payment to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. Now, it is not clear whether yet the proposed plan to purchase all the information from American Media had attracted the interest of federal prosecutors in New York. But the prosecutors have, in an interesting move, provided partial immunity to Mr. Pecker, who was a key witness in their inquiry into those payments made on behalf of Mr. Trump during the 2016 campaign. Now, the people who knew about the discussions would only speak about them on a condition of anonymity, given that they are now the potential subject of a federal investigation that did not end with Mr. Cohen's plea. So, now this is fascinating, right? Now, I reported before from the Associated Press, who talked about a vault they have filled with dirty stories about Trump. Now, the New York Times says that it's not known how much material on Mr. Trump is still in American media's possession, because as the Associated Press reported before, that Pecker had taken this from the vault and moved it to a place where he only knows the location of. So him and his co-chair of American Media. So they took that information. We don't know if they destroyed that information or if they kept it in another place. Now, someone like Pecker, who basically takes this information from celebrities, buys off these stories, does these catch and kill, would keep these stories around because that gives them leverage. Hey, man, look, I got leverage over you. So if you don't want this released, you're going to help us out. You're going to help us maybe get some tax cuts or just, allow us to print whatever we want. It's fine. As long as you play ball, they're never going to know about your secret affairs. They're never going to know about this. They're never going to know about that. It's an interesting racket. And this, of course, was started by Mr. Pecker. Now, prosecutors have not said whether they have obtained any of the material beyond that, which pertains to Ms. McDougal and Ms. Clifford, and the discussion about their arrangements. So, as I said before, this whole thing started with David Pecker. Now, for the better part of 2 decades, they explained that Mr. Pecker had ordered his staff at American Media to protect Mr. Trump from these troublesome stories, in some cases buying up stories about him and filing it away in their secret little vault. In 2016, to show how they had taken sides, He kept his staff from going back through the old Trump tip and story files that dated to before Mr. Pecker became company chairman in 1999. Several former staff members told in interviews with the New York Times. That meant that American media, the largest gossip publisher in the country, did not play a role in the election year in vetting a presidential candidacy, Mr. Trump's, made for the tabloids. So that's very interesting. So look, during the election, they could have run these stories and they could have cleaned up. Easily. Front page headlines. National Enquirer, right? They could have made a ton of money. What did they do? They didn't do it. Why? Because the person that Pecker's friend, Donald Trump, could become president of the United States, could become incredibly powerful, and then, by extension, the National Enquirer could also become incredibly powerful. They could be sitting in the press office, in the press pool. Legitimate media, independent media, they don't get in the press pool. But then you allow people like InfoWars, right? And Daily Wire and all these conservative outlets that make things up. They get to be in the press pool. They leave out progressive voices and actual outlets that tell the truth. And they give it to people. They give access to people who make up lies. And of course, American media wanted to be a part of that. Pecker definitely wanted to be a part of that. Now, Pecker also worked with Trump and Cohen to bury Ms. McDougal's story of an affair with Mr. Trump, a practice known as catch and kill. Mr. Cohen admitted as much in making his guilty plea last week. Not only that, but shortly after American media completed the arrangement with Ms. McDougal at Mr. Trump's behest, a troubling question began to nag at Mr. Trump and Mr. Cohen, according to several people who knew about the discussions at the time. What would happen to American media's sensitive Trump files if Mr. Pecker were to leave the country, the company? Not only that, but as you can see, the concern now is, well, Mr. Pecker just got immunity. So, now, Mr. Cohen, of course, those people said, was hearing rumors that Mr. Pecker might leave American media for Time magazine, a title Mr. Pecker is known to have dreams of running. There was perennial talk about American media's business troubles, and Mr. Trump appeared to take a world-rear view of the wisdom of leaving his sensitive personal secrets in someone else's hands. That's why they wanted to buy them off. Now, Mr. Trump said of Mr. Pecker in a conversation with Mr. Cohen, said, maybe he gets hit by a truck. Talking about his friend. Well, I mean, the guy's got all this information on me. Maybe he gets hit by a truck, you know what I'm saying? That's some friend you are, man. Now, when the Times first reported that the recording had been discovered by the FBI, people close to Mr. Cohen and Trump initially described it as the narrow context of Ms. McDougal's deal. But Mr. Cohen, in fact, indicates in the audio that he and Mr. Trump are speaking about arrangement involving far more, which would be the purchase of pretty much the entire cache of dirty secrets. Cohen said, I need to open up a company for the transfer of all that info regarding our friend David. Now, the plan got far enough along that Mr. Cohen relays in the recorded conversation that he had discussed paying for all the information from American media with the Trump Organization's chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg. He said, I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up, adding that Mr. Pecker, that we'll have to pay him something. Of course, in the end, there was no deal, and Pecker still has all of his dirty stuff on Trump, and Trump is without his Pecker. I know, that was terrible. Couldn't help myself. Sorry, guys. So, look, this situation, not good for Trump. Weisselberg also got partial immunity. Now, Mr. Weisselberg, they report, ultimately provided information about Mr. Cohen under a deal that protected him from self-incrimination. As prosecutors continue in their investigation, Mr. Weisselberg could serve them as a particularly helpful guide through the Trump Organization's operations And that's why it's a damn big deal. It's a really big deal that they've got Weisselberg, because Weisselberg has the books. You think Trump is smart enough to do his own books? Oh, of course not. Yes, he would continuously balk about money. That's because he's not a rich person. Donald Trump has gotten, well, I wouldn't say rich, but he's made his money off screwing people over. He's not a rich person. He's not a very good businessman. He couldn't even do this deal to secure his own dirty stuff. So, look, now Mr. Pecker, going to him, whose company is expected to be of continued interest in the investigation, also has a similar arrangement with prosecutors. Potentially as worrisome for Mr. Trump and his advisors, Mr. Pecker could be a particularly knowing guide through other possibly for potentially illegal efforts made to protect Mr. Trump's candidacy from his own less savory exploits. People with knowledge of American media's operations who would only speak on condition of anonymity describe the files of Mr. Trump as mostly older National Enquirer stories about Mr. Trump's marital woes and lawsuits, related story notes and lists of sensitive sources, some tips about alleged affairs, and minutiae like allegations of unscrupulous golfing. And as the Associated Press reported last week, some of that information was kept in a safe devoted to particularly sensitive material. Now, many of the older National Enquirer stories, they note, are often not accessible through Google or databases like Nexus. So, look, that's why they have the vault. They can't get it online. That's the only source of the information. So you got to wonder what kind of stuff they have in there. What the details. How far does it go? And the other question is, will it matter to Trump supporters? My guess is probably not. Going back to that interview with Robert Jeffress, right? He's like, oh, no, I don't actually care about any of that. You know why? Because he's right on the issues for us. So I don't care about his baggage. I don't give a damn about his baggage. What I care about is right in the issues. So in that context, when you look at that, it is interesting. And there are things that are potentially, possibly illegal in there. And that is a good reason to go and look after it. But I think the most important thing that we should do if you want to defeat Trump is to defeat him on policy. While this stuff is interesting, and look, there's possibly illegal things on there, I think still the best way to defeat Trump is to defeat him on policy, is to run a strong progressive candidate who is uncorrupted, who can defeat him on the issues. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.